Good morning, dear students. I'm Dr. Paul. I shall be teaching you philosophy of education. During this lockdown period, I have tried to make this into an online lecture where I've recorded a video along with PowerPoint slides to be sent to you periodically, which you can see at your leisure and then learn something. Let's see how we can communicate here. This is this slide. Here we go. Yes. Okay. So this is the set of slides that I've prepared. It's, as the name says it all, philosophy education. Okay. Study plan looks something like this. You look at that man trying to climb that rock over there. Our effort is something like rock climbing. Philosophy is a little bit of a tough discipline, and you have to exercise your mind. And there are many things you have to engage deeply with in order to come to a reasonable understanding of things. It is basically consisting of a few philosophical frameworks which you will need as educational leaders. Now, I know that when you get ordained and when you become part of the ecclesiastical leadership of the church, many of you will take up education as your apostolate. And if that's the case, you will be leaders of your educational apostolate. And at that time, you will need to have important ideas and frameworks using which you can lead your community of educationists or students or teachers or parents or regulators or whoever it is. And that will make a big difference when you have a philosophical outlook. These classes are designed for 30 classes and 15 weeks, ideally with face-to-face interaction, but we shall improvise the same to suit our online engagement. There's going to be lectures, and actually in the actual classroom of face-to-face discussion, we will also have interaction, but here, since it's a one-way video mode, you will only hear lectures from me, and those will be sent to you. We will apply these frameworks to some of the current problems of education and see how they throw light and we can derive insight from those frameworks. After that, we will have a revision by discussion. A few classes will be dedicated for that, and then there will be an oral examination, and the final goal is for you to learn something. Unless we really learn something and we have some profit, what is the point of all this exercise? So please keep in mind that you are ultimately expected to learn something. So let's start here. What is philosophy is the first question, and I like to say, as you may all already know, since you've done philosophy 1 year, the definition of the great mathematician and philosopher Pythagoras, who said that philosophy is the pursuit of wisdom. It is also known as the quest for truth. And so that's what it is. And just to tell you a little bit more, philosophy, the word comes from two Greek words, philos and sophia. Philos is love and sophia is wisdom. So philosophia is love of wisdom. It's a human activity for those with reasoning capacity. So practically anybody with the reasoning capacity can be a philosopher. It is a second order discipline. Interestingly, philosophy does not have any theoretical content of its own. It works on and it systematizes and it incisively undertakes uh, to derive insights into other disciplines. So that's why we have philosophy of science, philosophy of religion, philosophy of history, and philosophy of education, etc., etc. So it's a reasoning to be practiced, as we already said, and it's a method and a skill. You may have heard of this great method called the Socratic method. It is beautifully stated as the method that goes from ignorance to understanding. That was the method Socrates used, his questioning method. And the whole dialogues of Plato in the 3rd century BC talks about this aspect of dialoguing with Socrates as being the mouthpiece in his dialogues. So that is a method, it is a skill that goes through argumentation and method. It's not just facts that we are interested in, because if it's just facts, then it can be dealt with by any scientific person or a legal practitioner. Facts and empiricism alone do not constitute philosophy. There is also interpretation of values. So the philosopher is a person who is more interested in what interpretation you offer to a situation rather than the facts that lead to it. Reality is more than facts, it is also mystery. As we said, if reality is what you're interested in as a philosopher and wisdom is understanding reality, then you have to admit that there is not only facts, there is also mystery. Things that you do not know also are part of reality and therefore qualifies as a material for understanding wisdom. Philosophy is a human discipline, and we have the situation where we ask ourselves, how do we know the truth? We said in the previous slide that philosophy is the quest for truth. So the first question that pops out at us is, how do we know that we have the truth? And my simple answer to that is that truth brings deep, stable peace. And I borrow from the Gospel of John when Jesus said, if you are my disciples, you will keep my commandments. You know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Once again, if you are my disciples, you will keep my commandments. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. I want you to look at the last part of this statement. The truth will set you free. So freedom is being connected to truth. Okay, and if a person has got freedom, in that person you will have a deep and stable peace. And feeling that peace is a sign that you have the truth with you. Get it? Freedom and peace are almost equivalent. Only a free person can have peace. And when a person has got that kind of peace, he also has got the truth with him. That's how we know that we have the truth. There is no other way I know of hitting the truth. You cannot confine truth to facts, but it is a constellation of situations that brings deep, stable peace. It's a group of situations. It's not just facts, but a group of situations that yields that peace. So facts are verifiable, but peace goes much beyond. Philosophy, the handmaiden of theology, is a starting point for this. We know that philosophy is at the service of theology, and it must be a servant of theology. and that is the starting point to come to peace. We cannot study philosophy in isolation, but only as an interrelated human discipline. Now, uh, philosophy is highly practical. Although most of the discussion is done in talking and talking and talking, ultimately these discussions arrive at certain conclusions which are downright practical. So it's very important for us to realize that philosophy is a highly practical discipline. Let's see why philosophy. Philosophy gives clarity of thought. What do I mean by this? There's a field in philosophy called analytical philosophy, which is particularly relevant in this discussion. Uh, you know, when you look at a thing, when you look at a situation, you have many nebulous ideas, many cluttered ideas, many confusing claims, and philosophy is the discipline that helps you to declutter these ideas and principles and give you some clarity. So, clarity of thought is very important, and that is what you get when you study philosophy. What else? Philosophy makes the mind agile and sharp. Look at that man trying to sharpen his axe with a file. He's got an iron file and he's trying to sharpen that axe. He's actually doing that with his purpose to cut that piece of wood. And look at what King Solomon said in 900 BC. He said, if the iron is blunt and one does not whet the edge, he must put forth more strength, but wisdom helps one to succeed. So if the iron is blunt, if your mind is blunt, if your mind is not sharp enough, you will have to expend more energy, and that way your task will be much more difficult. But if your mind is sharp, then you can cut easily. So that's basically what Solomon says, and it's an important idea in sharpening the mind. It engages the question of why rather than how, because why is a question of deeper implication. It has got stronger ramifications rather than how. And how is a question of practicalities, whereas why has got how is a question of more immediate things. That is how we the technical aspect of doing something. But philosophy gives you the reason for doing it. Views nurtured by philosophical bent of mind carry more weight. Views, when I say that, when you are in public space and you are asked to give your opinion, if you speak biased, if you speak the person with a small mind, then you will not be able to engage your audience, and audience will not listen to you. But if you speak as a philosopher, you are more likely to get your points endorsed and heard by others. The nature of philosophy. The only means we have to have a civilized conversation in public space, especially with people of opposing views. Now, imagine a situation where two people, one an atheist and the other a religious person, are discussing. They're fighting with each other, each holding to his position. Now, the only way they can communicate with each other is when they take a philosophical stance. So, in public space, when two people are opposed, philosophy helps you to have a decent discussion. Philosophy works in the neutral zone where all can be heard. It is systematically puts the mind to work, and the mind is a gift of God. Now, we already said the public space, that is neutral zone. where all people have a right to be heard and speak, and systematically put the mind to work. The mind, of course, is not just a human instrument. It is one of the instruments given to us by God Himself. So it's important for us to exercise that mind. To grapple with reality, a philosopher must be open to all ideas, including death, the ultimate reality. That is why a good philosopher will have faith. And I venture to say that a good philosopher will make a good theologian. Now, a philosopher, if he's really a philosopher, he will be open to all reality. And one of the realities that he has to face is the reality of death. And when he does that, he has to remember how he is going to prepare for that great event in his life. And therefore, he will be bordering on faith. He will be bordering on faith, and he will ultimately make also a good theologian. So I say that a good philosopher will have faith, and he will make a good theologian. Similarly, a good theologian must clarify and validate his theological stand to hold an enlightened faith. What I mean by this here is that when we, as theologians or people with faith, make a claim, we ought to make reasonable claims. We cannot just talk in the air. We cannot just talk superstition. We have to talk reasonably for people to hear us and understand us. So, therefore, a good theologian will also be a good philosopher. Okay, philosophy and Christianity. Now, let's see what this great father of the church, Tertullian, had said. What has Athens got to do with Jerusalem? What he says is that Athens, which is the center of philosophical thought at that time, what has that area got to do with Jerusalem, which is the center of faith? Uh, there is no connection at all. And so he was against mixing secular knowledge with faith knowledge. And Saint Basil advocates just the opposite, studying Greek classics. He says, Saint Basil, the Eastern Father, says that one has got to study the Greek classics to have an enlightened faith. Christianity has a strong intellectual dimension because Christ is the eternal logos, the reason, and the word. We all know John's gospel, which says, the word in the beginning was the word, the word was God, the word was with God, and all that. And so Jesus is the word. He is the word of God. And therefore, he's the reason, or in Greek, the logos. Now, look at this question. Was Socrates Christian? He was a student of the Logos. He was a lover of the truth. He was a symbol of loving the truth in the old Greek times. And was Gandhi similarly a Christian? For him also, truth was God. And both these individuals, Socrates and Gandhi, if they were lovers of truth, then Jesus' statement includes them too. It says, "For this I was born in the presence of Pilate at the Praetorium." Jesus says at his trial, "For this I was born, for this I came into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Whoever is on the side of truth listens to my voice." So Socrates and Gandhi, who were on the side of truth, surely, would listen to Jesus' voice, and therefore they are Christian, isn't it? Catholic seminary formation builds up both faith and reason. This is historically how our seminary education has developed right from the monastic times onwards. Christians must distinguish between good and bad philosophy. Now, there is a reason to study philosophy, if not anything else, for us to defend ourselves and our church from poor quality philosophy, which is running helter-skelter in this world. So for us to distinguish between good and bad philosophy, we need good philosophy. We need to be philosophers. All knowledge is reconciled in the child around the manger. Now, just picture the situation where the child in the manger, Jesus is born on Christmas Eve, and the wise men are coming from the east. Wise men, they are people with knowledge and secular knowledge, and they are coming to see this babe in the manger. And this babe in the manger is able to reconcile all that is secular with the spiritual, with the rich, and with the poor, with the divine, with the supernatural. Everything is being reconciled in the babe in the manger. So it is important for us to have the Christian viewpoint, and Christianity helps us to modulate our views. Studying philosophy, therefore, is a worthy pursuit. So there is nothing wrong. We would distance ourselves from Tertullian and say that studying philosophy is not wrong and it is a worthy pursuit indeed. Why philosophy of education? A disciplinary field of philosophy that grapples with educational matters. Issues in education are generally decided by administrators, teachers, and politicians who have a practical approach in solving practical problems. They often lose sight of the aims of education. Now, we see we're living in a world where education is being claimed by many people, including politicians, administrators, and regulators, and all such people. And if we leave these ideas to them, they will be looking only at practical aspects of doing things, whereas the problems of education are much deeper, as we shall see. The questions at issue may be much deeper. To talk about them intelligently, we need the help of philosophy, where diverse approaches can be systematically considered. It's important for us to accommodate diverse views and take a considered judgment. Good education philosophy leads to good educational theory, policy, and practice. As heads of institutions, you will be served well if you have a good understanding of the various philosophies of education. You can put your point across well, take better decisions, and provide better leadership. So this is a reiteration of what I already said in the beginning. You as educational leaders are going to make important value judgments, decisions, and when you are informed with a sound philosophical viewpoint, background, you will be able to easily, incisively look at a situation and look at the merits of a situation. Okay, now let's look at an example of how a practical problem is seen differently just because there are three underlying philosophies. So this is a practice, policy, theory, and philosophy of education. So we have a situation where there is a teacher recruitment. When a teacher has been recruited, we see what are the problems and who is to be given preference for recruitment. And based on our ideas, there are three different things possible. One is the policy of objectivity, policy of reservation, and the policy of mercy. These are three very different policies. They're independent policies. So look at the problem of recruitment. If you subscribe to the policy of objectivity, then you will have one particular viewpoint. If you subscribe to the policy of reservation, you will have another one, and similarly with the policy of mercy. So first of all, you may have the theory of evolution and survival of the fittest, which is the underlying theory behind the policy of objectivity. And here you have the theory of caste discrimination. The government says that no, we don't worry about objectivity. We don't worry about merit. We have to give preference to certain castes because of their social subjugation over centuries of life. So, and here we have a third one, which is the theory of universal brotherhood. This is just a illustrative example, just to tell you how different philosophies lie beneath every important practical decision. So the first one here is what we call naturalistic philosophy, which is to do with the theory of evolution and survival of the fittest. It does not recognize anything except empirical aspects. And here we have political philosophy. This is this philosophy which is done by the ruling powers of the state, and they say nothing doing. Whatever you say is overridden by us. We, as a political program, are going to decide to give priority to a particular caste in teacher reservation. So that's a second way of doing things. And here we have the theistic philosophy, where the religious dimension comes in, the theory of universal brotherhood. So you see, the same problem, teacher recruitment, can be looked at from three different philosophies. And these underlying philosophies, when you know where you stand, then you can easily give a judgment on the situation. Otherwise, you will be fighting only on the surface. Your approach will be very superficial. When you know that these are the underlying philosophies of teacher recruitment, then you will be able to give a much better response to the question that you have at hand. So the first one here is practice, how we manage practice. The second one is policy. The third one is theory. And the fourth one is philosophy. So underlying all this is the philosophy that really drives the decision of practice. You see how that's interconnected. Now, one more example: practice, policy, theory, and philosophy. So here we have attitudes to knowledge. Let's see what happens here. The first is an attitude that develops seekers, and there are no more grand narratives, says this theory, and the philosophy here is called the postmodern philosophy. Postmodern philosophy says you can only develop seekers. Attitudes to knowledge are such that we can only have an approach to knowledge. We cannot have full knowledge, and therefore it is provisional, and therefore it is tentative and things like that. And so therefore, underlying this is the theory called no more grand narratives. There is nothing sacrosanct about any idea. Every idea is tentative and can be replaced by a better idea. That is the idea of postmodern philosophy. Similarly, now you have here developing finders. Instead of developing seekers, you have developing finders. And here we have the theory of capax universi, or capax Dei. This says that the human mind has got the capacity to understand the universe. Capax universi, and capax Dei is the capacity of the human mind to understand things of God. So this way you can develop finders, not only seekers, but finders who will go on to act with conviction and to disseminate and work for bringing the truth across. This is what we know as the Christian philosophy. So these are two different ways, the attitudes to knowledge. Again, if you're looking only at the surface of it, you will be lost and you will be fighting with each other for no reason. But if you come down to the basics, if you come down and drill down and see what is the practice, what is the policy, what is the theory, and what is the philosophy underneath, then you will know and you will appreciate and you will be able to give a better response to the idea of attitudes to knowledge. Okay, philosophical process must engage in critical dialogue. We must engage in critical dialogue. That means we don't learn things by rote. We don't learn things by just mental mugging up, as we call it in Hindi, but should not proceed ad hominem. What this means is that our philosophy here should not attack the personality of our opponent. Imagine a situation where we have a witness in a courtroom. When the witness goes and gives his testimony, he is making a statement, but the opposing lawyer may come across and say, this witness is a habitual liar. That this witness has got a bad moral character, and therefore he tries to destroy the personality of that witness, rather than attacking the value of the evidence. He attacks the person of the witness, and that is what we call argumentum ad hominem. So that is not allowed in philosophy. We never attack the opponent's personality or character, but only the issue that is at hand. Should have great intellectual hospitality. We must allow the other person to speak, and we must calmly listen to what he has to say. Give him the chance and the dignity to make his point. We should have a rigorous intellectual activity. We must take the ideas into our mind and grapple. Grapple means wrestle with these ideas and seriously come to a conclusion. Should appreciate the portion of truth buried in an opponent's view. When you have an opponent, it is not always wrong for him, or he may not always be wrong to say that there's something wrong with what we have said. There may be a grain of truth in what he says, and we take stock of ourselves and change our systems and be ready for a better world. So that's what we say. Philosophy helps you to take stock of yourself, even looking at the grain of truth in the opponent's point of view. That way, education becomes strong, broad, general, and humanizing. This is the philosophical process that we must develop. Shifting educational foci. Foci is the plural of focus. So focus here is, as one advances through years of education, the focus becomes narrower and more discipline-centered. However, one should never lose sight of the fact that one must keep oneself ever relevant to humanity. So there is a constant tug between the specialist and the generalist, between focusing too narrowly and going too broad. Now, here what it says is, as we advance in education from standard 1 or from kindergarten, as we go towards standard 10 and then standard 12 and then college graduation and then master's program and then PhD and so on and so forth, the area of specialization becomes progressively narrower and narrower. But then it's very important for us to keep ourselves broadly human. That is, if we are buried only in our own area of interest, we will not be able to dialogue we will not be able to engage with other people outside our curriculum. So that's what we have to do. We have to keep ourselves sufficiently broad and sufficiently narrow to get that focus. It's a fine balance. Nature of knowledge. Let's see what this means. Let's look at this. There are four boxes here. You see, the first one is titled facts, and there are two subdivisions: few facts and many facts. And on the left hand side, you have what is called connections. Again, there are two subdivisions: weak connections and strong connections. So let's take the combination now of few facts and weak connections. Now, knowledge, if it's such that the facts are few in name, in number, and the connections are very weak, then it is a very poor knowledge area. It's a very poor knowledge system. Similarly, suppose we take many facts and many facts and weak connections, then we say that we have encyclopedic knowledge or very broad level of knowledge. We know many things, but we know them only superficially. And then if you look at the bottom here, we have the the red box here. You have few facts and strong connections. So there are facts, you do not know many things, but you know them very deeply and intimately, and you know the connections between them, what the implications are between them. So therefore, your knowledge is what we call synoptic knowledge. And the last one here, the bottom right-hand corner, it is utopian. That is many facts and strong connections, which is not possible. Most of us are, I mean, we are only human, so we cannot possibly have this ideal situation. Many facts and strong connections, which is very difficult to do because the area of knowledge is so big and connections are so many that nobody can expect to be conversing with all of them. So among these four boxes, where do we find ourselves? I think the ideal position is somewhere in the synoptic knowledge, especially when we are advanced in knowledge. And then we go back and forth. There's a tug between the right hand top and the left hand bottom, and the right hand top boxes. There's kind of a dynamic situation where we have a synoptic knowledge and encyclopedic knowledge. So between this situation, we should be able to navigate our knowledge area. I just state that here. Encyclopedic knowledge, which is the right-hand top corner box, which says the focus is to learn superficially and laterally. It is characterized by breadth rather than depth. Student becomes a registering apparatus, a repository of knowledge widely read, limited by peripheral acquaintances, emotional coincidences, and weak connections. This is very important. See, when we learn things very broadly, then our connections are peripheral. And our emotional, there will be emotional coincidences between. We think we know more just because of these emotional coincidences and weak interconnections, but actually we don't. We just become a registering apparatus, a repository of knowledge, just a register of knowledge, but we will not be able to play with that knowledge much. Similarly, synoptic knowledge, we have the focus. The focus is to learn, characterized by depth rather than breadth, penetrative with multiple interconnections, and rich with meaning. Gives rise to strong convictions, limited by a narrow field of view. Now, this is the bottom left-hand corner box, which says the focus is to learn. So, not that we have all the knowledge with us, but we are ready to learn, and characterized by depth, because we do not have too many things to worry about. We know things more intimately, that is depth, we have a penetrative and multiple interactions with and rich with meaning. We will be able to find out which things with meaning and give strong convictions, give rise to strong convictions limited by a narrow field of view. So that's what it is. I think I've done something here now for you to digest and understand. Please study these concepts. And if you do not understand anything, please feel free to contact me. I will be very happy to tell you what I know. And there are many things that I myself am learning, and we can all learn together. Thank you very much. God bless you all. Have a good day.